Hello and welcome to Chaos to Clarity, the podcast that's your compass to navigate the exciting world of service-based businesses. If you're a determined woman in your current business adventure, striving to conquer the chaos and build your empire, then you are in the right place. I'm your host, Maggie, your go-to business bestie and chaos navigator. I've spent nearly 2 decades in the service-based industry, building a photography business, a yoga studio, and now a thriving coaching practice. I've cracked the code to consistent income without all the chaos and noise. So get ready to increase your business growth, connect with your ideal clients, and find ease in both business and in life. It's time to turn your frustrations into inspiration and your chaos into clarity. So go ahead and grab your coffee, a pen and paper, and let's dive into the journey of building your dream service-based business together. Are you ready? Let's go. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Chaos to Clarity podcast. My name is Maggie. I am your business bestie and your Chaos to Clarity coach. And today on the podcast, I have Parinaz with me, and I'm going to let her tell us all about herself. So if you could tell us who you are, who you serve, and how long you've been in business, that would be amazing.
Hey, my name's Parinaz. I am a spiritual guide and mentor for people. And I have been working with people who are essentially saying, I've done everything right in life. I've been doing everything that I have believed would lead me to happiness and success. And yet happiness and success seem to elude me on a daily basis. So I help people connect with their inner self, that part of them that lives beneath the surface of the everyday roles and responsibilities. And I've been doing that since, well, formally and kind of as my full-time gig for about 5 years.
Cool. Awesome. I love that. And I think that's something that I think we ask the question, like, why isn't this working? But sometimes we don't always seek the answer, right? A lot of myself included, right? Like there are times, and I actually had this epiphany this weekend driving to the conference that I went to. I said to my sister, I'm like, I think I like to sit in the chaos sometimes. And like having that download really allowed me to like explore those thoughts more. And I'm sure you see that with your clients.
I think that what you've described is, it's an act of self-awareness where you can see yourself in the midst of your life from a distance and say, I think this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really essential for us getting out of our own way in life. Yeah. Because all of us have stress. We all have the chaos. We all have the anxiety and the overwhelm, but few of us are able to really get to the root cause of why it's there. Mm-hmm. We say like, oh, it's my boss. Oh, it's my kids. It's my spouse. And those can be real sources of stress. It's not to minimize what is going on in anybody's life, but it is to say that your reality is a mirror for how you relate to yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So your reflection about yourself, which is maybe I love to be in the chaos.
Yeah.
It's, if, we get from life what we are, not really what we want.
Right. So. Yeah. Well, and I think, just speaking from my own experience, right? The 38 years of life that I've lived, right? Like the chaos sometimes feels so familiar and known that is, it's like, oh, I'll just go make a mess of this thing, right? And not even like consciously doing it, like subconsciously doing it. And I'm well aware of this, right? Like I've noticed these patterns happening, and I've been doing a lot of like personal reflection work to, like understand what is a trigger for me, like what are these things that are, like pushing me to that point where I'm like, oh, I'm just going to burn it down instead of actually like taking the time to work through it. And it's a very interesting and like, it's a crazy like process to go through. Right. And it's just, and especially as a business owner with that added level of complexity of like, I'm my own boss, and like I get to call the shots in my business, which is great and wonderful, and also terrible, right? Like, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but like if I am not disciplined, the work doesn't get done and the money doesn't get made. So, right, like how can I be disciplined in a way that feels good, and feels like me without being like so overwhelmed.
Right. And it sounds like, and I can relate to this too, working for myself, that discipline is really, you have to have self-awareness, because if you're so addicted to the drama, you're not productive. You're too busy in the drama.
Right.
So you do really have to hold a lot of awareness, bigger picture on yourself, and ask yourself real honestly, am I contributing to my struggle, or am I helping myself move beyond the struggle?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really something that yoga helped me see, was that self-awareness, right? Where when I started yoga, I was like, oh, I had no clue what I was doing. I went into a class and I like came out of Shavasana and I'm like, I don't know what just happened, but I want to come back. I need to come back, right? And in that, opening that door to yoga really allowed me to like kind of get a peek inside my own brain and understand that chaos, right? And start to be aware of like things that it's like, oh, I am the one choosing to stay in this drama, whatever it is, whether it's, little, like I used to work in corporate, right? So the little nitpicky corporate drama, or whether it's the big, like, like a relationship type drama or whatever that is. But like being aware of that allowed me to shift in a way and grow in a way. And, there were people that I was very close to that all of a sudden, like I went through this major self-growth, and all of a sudden they were like, yeah, no, I'm not about that. And I got hurt, right? Like I was sad about that. So grieving that, but now, like years later, I've reconnected with some of those people, and I'm like, and they've gone through their kind of like self-awakening or just like shifting and changing and realizing. And now I'm like, oh wow, like this is so cool to be so aware and to like revisit some of those relationships with new lenses and say, is this good for me to go back into this friendship, or is it not? And like to really realize that I have the choice.
That sounds powerful.
Yeah.
It's, I think, a meaningful experience when you are, as you said, able to get a peek at yourself from the inside. You're able to see the ways in which you are keeping yourself stuck in a certain way of existing. And when you're able to see that, then you can make different choices, which helps you, as you use the word, awaken. And it's great to have the times where you see yourself change. It's challenging when you see yourself changing and others around you aren't, and that friendship or that relationship that was so great for so long now feels like it's a bit harder to connect. But ultimately, to be alive is to be in change. So it's a powerful thing. And I like how you were able to also reconnect with some of those things. That's a nice experience to have, to come back to it.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely like to take some of that knowledge into business, right? Because so much of business is relationships, right? Relationship with yourself, relationship to your clients, to people who could be referral or collaboration partners, right? Like everyone can play a different role. And then having that awareness of yourself to say, yes, this feels like a good road to travel down, or no, it doesn't, right? And it's okay to say no. I think as business owners, especially in maybe some of the earlier years, and I've owned businesses for 16 years. I've even still like felt this in the last, I would say 6 months, where it's like, I feel like I have to do something, right? Because someone's like, oh, we should do XYZ. And, I'm like, oh yeah, yes. And like, like many people, I'm a recovering people pleaser, right? Where I got so used to saying yes that I got so exhausted, went through burnout. And then like after that, I was like, no, it's time to set boundaries, right? So now I really kind of protect some of that energy of mine and say like, yes, this feels good for me to do this, or I'm having some reservations, maybe not right now, or maybe it's just straight up, no, this doesn't check for me. It's not for me.
And what helps you protect your energy?
I would say a lot of what I use to protect energy is definitely like just meditation, right? Like every day, taking some time to really check in with myself and say, what is my energy level? And then I've done a lot of like learning about muscle testing and different ways to muscle test and just understanding like so I am fairly into human design, right? Like understanding what that is. So I make decisions with my sacral, and then, just understanding like, what is my body telling me? Is my body like leaning in, going, yeah, this feels good? Or am I kind of leaning back going, I'm not so sure. Like usually if that's happening, right, then I'm like, okay, I need some clarifying questions. And then I can usually make a decision fairly quickly, right, based on that. And I used to think that was a bad thing until I started learning more just about like spiritual stuff and like human design, astrology, like all of that, like woo woo, right? All of that stuff. When I started learning more about that, I was like, no, that's actually like that's who I am, right? It's okay that that's how I make a decision. It's okay that I know sometimes intuitively that, yes, this is going to be a great person for me to connect with. Sometimes even before I've said much more than, hi, I'm Maggie. Like there are times where I'm like, oh, I feel this energy feels good to me. And it's very interesting to explore that.
Yes. Totally. I can resonate with everything you're saying. And I feel like I am in the world of spiritual healing. And really the spiritual healing is we all have our own way of moving through the world. We have an intelligence in our body speaking to us all the time. And our power really starts to blossom when we connect into our unique way of speaking and moving and listening to ourselves. So I think it empowers us, which does lend itself to feeling like our energy is protected. It doesn't get drained and pulled in a million directions. We're not exhausted and burnt out all the time. So
Yeah.
totally resonate with what you've just said.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what is something challenging that you have overcome in business? And how did it affect your business?
Well, really, when I think about that question, what comes to mind is something you've already said in this conversation, which is the hardest times in business for me have been when I have felt most like I needed to be somebody else. And I think when you go into business, that is inevitable. In fact, maybe when you undertake any significant project, that could be raising kids, could be a relationship of some kind. When you undertake something that's just so massive and so personal, I do believe that you run into the blocks of your own conditioned mind. And mind is the voice in your head saying you should be more this way, you should be less that way, you should be here by now, you should not have to struggle with this, and why aren't you more like this? So for me, the biggest thing that I have come up against, and it has not been once or twice, it's been multiple times over the years, is really being tested on how much do you really respect, really revere who you are at your essence. Because your decision to waver right now in this moment on this choice is really a moment where you're looking at yourself and saying how much you respect yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So without, giving like specific examples in depth, that has happened so many times where I really just had to go through periods of learning sometimes the hard way, which is I don't trust myself. I don't listen to myself. I do it the way you're quote unquote supposed to. And then dealing with the whiplash from that, the engagement is never as strong. The client referrals drop off. The quality of my own work can sometimes be affected. And on the flip side of that, when I have just done things the way that my intuition knows is right, even though it's not standard practice in the world of business, things have worked. And that makes sense because if I put my business in the context of me and my life, that has been me. I have always been a bit of a misfit. I've always been somebody who doesn't do things just because it's the norm. And so it would make sense that my business is going to follow suit. And I'm also in a business that is about helping people connect to their essence. So, of course, how could it be that you'd have a business about cultivating the uniqueness of an individual and yet it follows the most, societal normative way of doing it? It could go that way, but it doesn't for me, and it makes sense why it doesn't for me. So how it has affected me, the second part of your question, ultimately, it has made me realize just how powerful and potent your intuition is if you actually truly put stock in it. Yeah. Everybody talks about trusting your gut. Everybody says that. And I think once in a while, or maybe more than 50% of the time, depending on how much you lean into this world, you do listen to your gut, but it is truly, honest to goodness, always giving you guidance, and it is never wrong. So what I've learned to do is completely letting go of the concept that I am in charge of this business. And really what I believe that is detaching from my ego.
Yeah.
And when I say ego, just for clarification purposes, I'm not talking about like, the big bad monster. It's just the sense of I, the identity that we've established as who we are today. And I think releasing that ego allows for the greater wisdom, the deeper intuition to speak through me. And it works better that way. So it's taught me how to take a step back and to not edge out that inner voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the ego that's all of the shoulds, right? I should do this. I should do that. I'm not, right? That's all of those thoughts that are coming in, downloading. I'm not fast enough. I'm not here. I'm not there. Like that's the ego trying. I feel like that's the ego trying to protect you, right? Like trying to not necessarily hold you back, but not allow for some of the big changes, right? When you step into entrepreneurship, you are faced with every fear that you didn't know you had and all the fears that you also knew you had, right? Like you are faced with all of that. And I feel like almost tenfold in a coaching business, right? Because you're helping people on such a deeper level, right? Even in a business coaching business, I didn't realize I would be faced with so many fears that like I had like packed away, or I thought I had packed away years ago. They came right back up to the surface to, like test me and to see like, are you ready to, again, step over this fear and say, nope, not today. Right. And I know it's not always that easy to say, no, not today. But the more that these things would keep coming up to say, okay, what am I doing that this fear is coming up? And how can I do things differently?
Yeah, I think in hearing you speak, it's so true that entrepreneurship does bring out every skeleton in your fear closet.
Yeah.
And I think that really any courageous act will do that. Whether it's starting your own business, whether it's stepping into a coaching or mentorship role, whether it's starting a family or beginning a new relationship or putting yourself out there for a promotion or whatever. It could be literally anything, even cooking a new recipe. Anything
Right.
that requires courage is going to open the door wide open inside of you for those fears and insecurities and doubts to come back out. Um, and you're right, it is that ego, it's the conditioned voice that we've been carrying along the way that is really the voice of the people around us, whether it's parents or the teacher we had or society. It's the voice saying, you're not really good enough as you are, or who do you think you are, or why do you think you deserve this, or you're not really worthy of this position. And so I think that courageous acts, they'll do that. They're going to freak us out. They're going to make the fear flare, but they also are an opportunity for us to step back and say, I don't want to listen to those voices in my head that are fear-based anymore. And instead, I want to connect to that deeper intuition, that intelligence of my body. And I think they can, these courageous acts can also be the start of opening our lives up to possibilities we haven't known before, because that's what courage does. It invites us into that space, and it does put the ego in its place.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, in the fear of success, right? So they'll stay stuck in the chaos saying, like, oh, I'm still working on this thing, I can't launch it yet. Because sometimes subconsciously, their subconscious is saying, okay, if you have all this success, what's the best thing that could happen? This thing will sell out. I'll make millions. I'll have 100 clients. I'll have, right, all this stuff. And suddenly you're like, oh, maybe I don't want this thing, right? And to really kind of understand how you can navigate that, I think is so powerful, right? And I think that's where a lot of like your work with people comes in, right? Because now you get to you almost kind of get to step back and kind of like watch these two versions of yourself, like, okay, here are the successful, unsuccessful, or whatever you're deeming it, right? And like, how do I want to navigate it?
Yes, I think that I was actually just having this conversation with a friend last night. He is very successful, in progress getting a PhD at Princeton, and he's sort of saying, I do have these really doubtful, critical voices in my head, but part of me wonders if it's not such a bad thing, because I think it's that critical mind of mine that's gotten me to where I am. And I hear this a lot from the people I work with. I hear it more from my male clients than female clients, but I think for anybody who's ambitious, anybody who is achievement oriented, which is everybody that I work with,
Right.
this becomes a thing where they're like, well, if I do some of this inner healing work, am I going to lose my edge? Am I going to lose my strength?
Right.
And I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions out there. That in building self-trust and in building calm within yourself, in becoming self-assured, you're somehow no longer competitive and strong, speaks to how much we live in a world that is so based on fear and self-deprecation and comparison.
Yeah.
It feeds on it. And so I think that really allowing yourself to see that if you can develop that self-awareness, which we've been talking about, awareness of that's just the fearful voice in my head. I don't need to give it weight right now.
Right.
That's just, the voice of my mother in my head. I don't have to let it be the guiding voice right now. If you can develop that self-awareness, you will not only still have your edge, you will do so much more with so much more happiness.
Yes.
Because you're now not questioning yourself every step of the way. You're no longer saying, oh my gosh, if this doesn't work out, everybody's going to hate me and I'm going to disappoint everybody. And I can't, sleep at night because of these decisions I've got to make. You will move through those things with so much more ease because you will be anchored in an understanding of who you are. And I think that really only can happen when we have gone deeper and done some of that inner healing, self-awareness, self-acceptance work, which is essentially what we're talking about. It's how you overcome challenges in business, in family, in relationships, in your own health.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So what is one business tip? So on that note of like, going further in your business, what is one business tip that you would share with someone who is either starting their journey or maybe they feel stuck in the chaos right now? What's something that you would tell someone else?
Let go of who you think you should be.
Yeah.
It's so much ultimately about how you relate to yourself.
Yeah, I think that's so huge, right? And to think about like, I can be whatever I want to be without having the I should be doing this behind you, like holding you up. If you want to change, change. If you don't, right? Like,
yeah. I think to give a business related example, I think for a long time, I was trying to ride this perfect line of put out my message, but do it in a way that was totally palatable to everybody and give like spiritual insight without making anybody uncomfortable.
Right.
And that's not how that works.
Right.
My own personal healing journey has been so raw and so gritty and so deeply uncomfortable. And the clients that I have the privilege to work with, it is not glossy.
Right.
It's not rainbows and butterflies, but that's where transformation takes root.
Yep.
And so I, for a long time, was trying to ride that line because I was trying to be somebody I thought I should be, which really was just the idea in my head that had been passed to me. And there were multiple. There was the idea from my family and that version of success that I was supposed to embody. There was the version of, the online business owner who has 1 million followers on Instagram and everything's so like and you don't actually work. And then there's the idea from, my inner self. It's like all of these concepts of who you should be are fighting with each other. And because that fight is going on in your head, you can't do your real work. You can't actually show up for your real God-given purpose.
Right.
And that is then why we're so frustrated with ourselves.
Right.
We're like, oh my gosh, I'm not fulfilled. I'm not doing what I could. I'm not providing what I could. I'm not helping the number of people I could. Why? I'm trying so hard. Sure, you are trying hard, but what are you trying hard at? Are you waking up every day participating in that battle of the voices? Or are you doing the work of set aside the ego, get connected to yourself, ground into who you are at your essence, and let it flow, no matter who it disappoints, no matter who it rubs against, no matter what you feel like it's, dismantling, it's meant to happen. And I think that is so true for business. And it's also true for every other part of life.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I think, it's interesting that you talk about like the disappointment, because I think that so many times what we think is going to quote unquote disappoint someone is really not something that that other person is actually even aware of, right? For a long time, I thought, oh, if I don't get to a certain level in this business and any of my businesses, that I would like disappoint my family. And that has never been the case, right? My family has always just very much stood beside me and like cheered me on. So that was like my own ego saying, you're going to disappoint everyone, right? Without that actually being the truth. And when I was able to take a step back and really see that I was creating that chaos, right? Like that I was creating that problem, it became so much easier to when those thoughts would come up again to say, no, this is actually not what they think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think hearing you speak, it's really interesting because I'm thinking of two things concurrently. One is that saying rising tides raise all boats. If you allow yourself to get out of your own way and show up for the things that really matter for you, you are raising the quality of your life. And you're
Yes.
holding yourself to a higher standard, and everybody in your circle is going to come with you because that's how it works. And I think that's part of our sacred responsibility. You're going to disappoint people along the way, primarily the people who want you to just stay right where you are. But
Yes.
you have to remember that you're here on purpose. Your life is on purpose, and it's to enhance and evolve the quality of the path you're on and those around you. So, raise the tide, number
Right.
one. And then I think the second thing that was in my mind as I'm hearing you speak is this is such a common thing for women because we are told that we have to be everything at once. And
Yeah.
so you have to be, the best mother all the time. You
Yep.
have to be nurturing and supportive, and you have to have the answers, and you have to have all the energy and all the passion and the excitement. And you also have to be independent, and you have to be smart. And yes, you should be able to run a business. And yes, that should just be able to kind of flow alongside, raising a family. Why wouldn't it just work more? And women are also constantly moving from a historical position of deficiency,
Right.
perceived deficiency. So women, I feel, although we know we are actively moving beyond the script of patriarchy and the box women have been put in, at the same time, we can doubt ourselves at times. We
Right.
can get in our own way because of that patriarchal narrative that we have
Right.
historically been fed. So, as you were saying, I really had to realize how much I'm participating in my own chaos.
Yeah.
Of that is looking at the societal script, what we're up against as women, and say, I am not going to be shoved down.
Right.
When you're shoved down historically, generationally, we can subconsciously shove ourselves down. Play it safe. We'll play it small. We'll take the back seat because that's just what we've learned we should do, which
Right.
is why I say, let go of everything you have heard you should be if you want to be successful in business
Yeah.
and as a woman and as a person.
Yeah. And like I really agree. And it's so, so I have two kids and it, I've noticed just how much really falls on my shoulders. And I do have a very supportive husband and spouse and family, right? Like I have so much support, but I've also noticed that I let it stay on my shoulders instead of asking for the help sometimes. So, like for me, like one of my challenges to myself was when I feel overwhelmed, ask for the help, right? Whether that is something as small as, hey, could you just pick up some to-go food for dinner tonight? I don't feel like cooking. or whether that is something bigger, like, hey, I have some really important stuff for my business. I need you to pick up the kids and take them to these places, right? Like, or something bigger than that, right? Like, that has allowed me so much growth. And it's also like empowering to my husband too, in an odd way, right? When it's really like, well, why wouldn't you feel empowered for that? So, like, as much crap as women get, I also feel like there is a certain amount for men as well. And it's interesting to see the shift in our society. Like right now, I feel like we're in such a big shift and like awakening and recognizing that it's really kind of cool to see, especially for people who are like, I guess, awakened, for lack of better terms, right? Where they're now at like, I am comfortable asking my spouse to pick up some of the duties as a parent, right? And it, like, I feel like it just opens doors for, at least in my mind, for myself and my spouse.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's where that concept of equity comes in.
Yeah.
Couples equity. Yeah, I was
Right.
actually just reading an article earlier this morning from the New York Times about the gender pay gap and how essentially until there is equity among people, among couples,
Right.
uh, that's going to be an issue. And that is, I think, what you're speaking about. But what you said that stands out to me, when I'm able to step out of that box that I have unconsciously stepped into of, well, I'm the mom, I'm the wife, I'm the woman, I'll just put this all on my shoulders. When I am courageous enough to step out of that and do the what would be considered historically disappointing thing and say, hey, why don't you pick up the dinner tonight, for example? You said it empowers him too. And that's the whole thing of it. The thing we're most afraid to do that we think is so wrong, so disappointing. Oh my gosh, I couldn't.
Yeah.
It actually is so empowering to everybody. Hence that saying, rising tides lift all boats. But
Yep.
somebody's got to have the courage to do it. And I think
Yeah.
this is what women are so uniquely suited to do because we've been put into the box, but we have the courage to do so much more.
Yeah.
So it's exciting, really, but
Right.
it does require us to be really connected to ourselves, to
Mm-hmm.
know who we are at our essence, and to really put those voices in our head of who we are, we should, quote unquote, be away, put them away, and learn how to continually put them away softly without shaming yourself, so that that real inner self can blossom, because that's what gets it done.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it lessens the judgments, right? Of like, oh, I should be doing this. And look at Sally down the street. She's just got it all together, right? It lessens that judgment of like, I don't know, maybe Sally down the street doesn't have it together, but she puts on a good face, right? Like, so I think it definitely starts to bring that equality, equity, right? Like it brings everyone back to this level of like, oh, hey, I need some help. Could you help me? And there's just so much like reciprocity that starts to happen. It's really amazing.
Yeah. Yes, I totally agree.
I love it. So what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self? And this can be business or personal, it doesn't matter.
Trust yourself.
Yeah.
I I I can think of so many times where I just didn't have the guidance
Mm-hmm.
to know how to trust myself. It's the
Right.
most intuitive thing. It's instinct, relying on instinct. It's a primal thing, but I didn't know how to do that. I think a lot of us are at baseline living lives where that there's a big distance between us and our instinct. because we live in a society where we don't have to really rely on instinct. So much is programmed for us, and our lives are so scheduled, and we're not living in harmony with the rhythms of nature, and therefore we're not really living in the harmony with the rhythms within us. So I just think that it's so easy to not trust yourself, not see yourself as somebody who already has the answer. I think that we see ourselves as people who are capable of finding the answer, and people who are determined and smart enough to find solutions outside of us. But I wish that I could say to my younger self, when I was my younger self, trust what's already within you.
Yeah, I think it's big and that's powerful. And I love that, because I feel like I would say that to myself as well, right? Like in those moments where I was scared or unsure, just to have that reassurance of like, yeah, I trust myself. I trust that this is all working out for me, that it will all work out for me, that it's already like laid out, and like I am here for this shift and change and growth. Yeah, I love that. So what is, this is the last question and probably my favorite question. So if you were a kitchen utensil or gadget, what would you be and why?
Probably either a cheese grater or a can opener, because both are just so satisfying in the process. The outcome is cool. Like if you think about a can opener, it's cool to watch the lid actually come up. I just think the process of those two utensils is really cool. The grating itself is neat. The opening of the can itself is kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
And I have never thought about that, but when you asked that question, that was very clear to me. So I guess that's that.
I love that though. And I feel like that's really perfect, right? Because if you think about what you do in respect to like a can opener, I can see like how similar those are, right? Because you're like opening, I mean, I think of like opening a can of whoop ass, but you know, like you're opening a can to like help people have that shift and change within themselves, right? So you are the facilitator of opening that up and allowing that change and growth. It's so awesome. I love it.
Okay, I'll take that.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been such an amazing conversation. I will link everything down below in the notes, but if you just want to let everyone know the best way to connect with you, that would be awesome.
Yeah, the best way to reach me is either on social media, Instagram, or email, and both of those will be linked below. And I also have a podcast. Maggie will be featured on it. So make sure you come check it out. It's all about spiritual healing and really the things that are not talked about in the mainstream in terms of how do you live a life that's truly fulfilling.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. It has been so great to have you on.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Wow, what a great interview. Thank you so much for showing up here on the Chaos to Clarity podcast. Again, my name is Maggie. I'm so excited to connect with you. You can find all of the information, all of the links below in the show notes for today's interview. And I hope you have the best day ever.